Welcome back to my Elder Scrolls lore series. Now this is just a reminder, a lot of Elder Scrolls lore comes from out-of-game sources. And as per my usual disclaimer, anything I say here may vary wildly from what a lore master may tell you. But if you're okay with all of that, let's get on to episode 6. Ysmir Wulfharth and Tiber Septim. As we already established, during the First Era, the Elysian Empire of Cyrodiil was overtaken by a religious organization known as the Elysian Order. This order believed that Elysia was the one true god. The order would drive the Elysian Empire to crusade throughout Tamriel, bringing the word of the Elysian Order to it. However, nearly 200 years after this occurrence, King Wulfarth of Etmora would come to Skyrim. Deposing those he would call unworthy rulers, King Wulfarth managed to restore the Nordic pantheon to worship within Skyrim. His first major act upon gaining the throne was to destroy all of the Elysian temples in the province. Then he would go on to drive the Draenei clan out of western Skyrim, reclaiming it for the Nords. During these campaigns, Wulfharth was given the title the Breath of Kine by his subordinates. For like many Etmoran king before him, he had the power of the voice, and legends of him eating a thundercloud to protect his troops can be attributed to him using the Clear Skies shout. As Etmorans were much greater than modern-day Nords, he was nearly invincible in combat, and his death would come not by an army or a superior foe, but rather a god. The legends of Orkey and Malakath became twisted up in the mythic and gave birth to a third god, known as Orkey, a god of the orcs, the orcish god of trickery and death. At that time, Nords had similar lifespans to Aldmer, and so in turn, Orkey channeled the power of a Nordic god, Alduin the Time Eater. Now being an evil god to be feared and placated, Alduin responded to Orkey's call, and ate away at the years of the Nords. Not only did this limit the Nord lifespans significantly, but it also reduced them all to the age of 6. Wulfharth pleaded with Shor, god of the underworld, to help his people, and Shor sent an avatar to fight the spirit of Alduin. Being that Alduin's incarnation was only a pale ghost of his true self, Shor won the battle easily. The sudden defeat of Alduin, coupled with the dispelling of his curse, caused a backlash. The followers of Orkey, and by extension all orcs, were cursed, and now lived much shorter lives than other elves. Although humans would never have a lifespan quite comparable to the elves again, they gained back a human's duration of life because of the dispelling of the curse. Even with the curse dispelled, however, they were all reduced to 6 years. That is to say, all Nords were but children at the time, including Wulfharth himself. Wulfharth, however, had witnessed the battle in the sky between Shor and Alduin, and he'd learned many new words which he turned into Thumes. One new Thume that he gained allowed him to alter time, that is, to age himself and a target. And so he used this Thume to return all his people back to normal adults. However, because he used this ability on so many, the number of years he gained was far beyond that of the Greybeards. He grew older than anyone had ever seen before, and died. Over 100 years later, the Nords would continue their endless battle against the Dark Elves of Morrowind. A Dark Elf named Vorin Dagoth would betray the other Dark Elves and tell the Nords where the Heart of Shor was located. Vorin Dagoth did this knowing that the Nords would attack Red Mountain. This was a location controlled by Dumak Dwarf King and his follower Kagranak. However, the Nords did not go alone. Their greatest mages used both magic and the Way of the Voice together in order to summon Shor back into the world. The ghost of Shor went to the ashes of King Wulfharth, and using his divine power, he remade Wulfharth from those ashes. In this, Wulfharth was the flesh, where the ghost of Shor was the will. Wulfharth was Shor's avatar. As Shor was Lorkan to the elves, so too was he Shezzer to the Imperials. And those who bore Shezzer's spirit, those who were incarnations of Shezzer in the mortal world, would be known as Shezzerines. Wulfharth being that first Shezzerine. And while the Dwemer defending Red Mountain were utterly defeated, and while Wulfharth had his hands on the Heart of Shor, in the moments before the Ghost of Shor was able to reclaim his ancient powers and rejoin the world of the living, he was betrayed by Lord Dagoth. Lord Dagoth had only joined with the Nords in order to see them all eliminated in one foul swoop, the strongest of their race killed. One version of the legend has it that the Dark Elf sorcerers lifted up all of Red Mountain and then dropped it on top of Shore, trapping him forever underneath. However, another account has Lord Dagoth using Sunder to strike the ghost of Shore, making him solid. Sunder was one of the dwarven tools of tonal architecture, that is to say, time, space, and all things within the world can be thought of as a song, and using this hammer, they were able to retune the world. Made vulnerable from Sunder's tuning strike, it is said that Lord Dagoth cut the heart of Shore out of him. With this, Shore was defeated, and his ghost faded from existence. Wulfharth, being reconstituted from the power of Shore, returned to the ashes that made him. It is said at that moment that the breath of Kyne blew through and carried his ashes away on the wind, freeing him from the prison that now held the Heart of Shore. It is said that Kyne took him to the higher realms, and he ascended as a god, much like Elysia did in the Imperial Pantheon. And so from then on, the Nords also worshipped Ysmir, the Hero King, God of Man, born from humanity. This Nordic legend is the truth that most people would come to accept, the false truth that permeated history and became, as far as anyone knew, reality. However, Wulfharth did not die that day, because indeed, having been returned from death, Wulfharth could not truly die. He was immortal. In this sense, you could say he was banished from death. He was cursed with unlife, and having lost this great battle, having the essence of Shore dispelled, he was left hollow. He remained a king, but he would now rule from the shadows. He would be known as the Underking. Throughout his unending life, he would do many great deeds, and some of his later deeds would be attributed to a legend known as Talos Stormcrown, Talos of Etmora, born of the North. However, Talos was merely a mask, or a mantle, that the Underking was wearing in order to perform his deeds. And the Underking would eventually no longer need this mantle and discard it. At the time he discarded that mantle, there were two other legendary warriors in that age. One was a wizard named Zurin Arctus, the first of the true Imperial battle mages. His magic was beyond the comprehension of the Nords who were living in that time, and many of the great spells he performed, magical feats beyond mortal comprehension, they were twisted within myth and legend until they were miracles performed by Talos Stormcrown. Zurin Arctus did not perform these miracles on his own accord, but rather he did so in the service of his companion, a man from High Rock named Halti Earlybeard. No one knows what drove him to try to conquer the known world, but he did so. And with his ferocity and unmistakable spirit in battle, that is, the spirit of Shore, people would misidentify him as Talos of Etmora. But being an extremely clever man, he did not reject that mantle, rather wore it proudly. He became, in everyone's eyes, Talos of Etmora. He grabbed that identity that the Underking had discarded, and in doing so, he had grabbed the unwavering support of the Nord people. There would have been no other way that a foreigner could have gotten support of the Nords, but he was one of them now. He had always been one of them. He was a great warrior king. Hearing of this legendary king that he used to be, the Underking went and entered into Talos' service in order to meet the man who had picked up his mantle. And so the person he met, Halti Earlybeard, Talos of Etmora, this man took on a third name. He took on the name of Tiber Septim. But in the hearts and minds of all the Nords, he would always be Talos of Etmora. So the legendary Nordic warrior who came from Etmora, that is Wulfarth. The man who performs miracles of magic, that is Zurin Arctus. And the commander who rose up an empire and conquered the world, that is Tiber Septim. Three separate individuals, all bearing the title of Talos Stormcrown, all wearing the same mantle, and myth and legend would combine those three individuals into one person. One legend, 1 Talos. After the Tiber Wars, it is said that Tiber Septim traveled to Morrowind and spoke with Vivec, their living god. Morrowind joined the Empire of Tiber Septim as an autonomous state. Morrowind maintained its freedom of religion and freedom to self-rule, and in return it gave soldiers to the Imperial Legion and swore fealty to the Empire. As a final act of goodwill, Vivec gave Tiber Septim the Numidium, the Dwarven brass god. With not a lie but a half-truth, he told Tiber Septim that the Numidium was broken. He did not tell Tiber Septim that it was to be powered by the Heart of Lorkan, also known as the Heart of Shore, and the Numidium sat in Imperial possession for some time. That is until Tiber Septim decided it was time to complete his conquest over Tamriel and acquire the Somerset Isles. Knowing that the Altmer had the most powerful elder wizards that anyone had ever known, he set Zurin Arctus upon the task of powering and reactivating the Numidium. It's not known how they found out that Wulfharth or the Underking was with them the whole time. But when they discovered his immortal nature, they sought upon ripping his heart out and using it to power the Numidium. Although most people would think Zurin Arctus was in fact the Underking, that his heart was sacrificed willingly to use the Numidium. The Akirian heresy written by the Underking himself debunks this. Reality almost always is somewhere in between. What most likely occurred was that Wulfarth managed to kill Zurin Arctus, but had his heart ripped out in the process. Tiber Septim, being the one left alive, used the heart in conjunction with the notes Zurin Arctus left behind. Another popular theory is that Zurin Arctus, in killing Wulfarth and ripping his heart out and dying at the same moment, caused the two's souls to merge into the same body. There is, however, no evidence of this. However, it does account for the two conflicting stories, two souls controlling the same body at separate times. Either way, what we absolutely do know is that either Wulfarth or Zurin Arctus' heart was ripped out and used to power the Numidium. If we believe the story where the Underking was cursed with immortality, then that immortal heart would make a lot more sense, powering the Numidium for all time. There is other evidence that this occurred as well, however, getting into that would be horribly off topic and would take us into areas that, simply put, we don't have time for right now. Either way, whether or not Wulf was betrayed, whether Zurin Arctus gave the heart willingly, history is ultimately written by the survivors. And Tiber Septim was the survivor of that encounter. Therefore, he told a story about how Zurin Arctus nobly sacrificed his heart. And using the power of Great Numidium, he washed over the Somerset Isles, killing all resistance and taking over all of the ancient kingdoms of the High Elves, unifying all of Tamriel under his rule. It is said that when his great conquest was done, he returned to Cyrodiil, the heartland of his new empire. His legacy, when he died, he would leave behind for his heirs the Septim dynasty. They would inherit the entire world. However, despite this, he was not, at this time, hailed as a god. To the Imperials, many still worshipped Delicia and Shezer, technically meaning there were 11 divines, although their temple presences were not nearly as large as the chantries of the various 8. At this point in history, Ebenarm, the 9th divine, god of war, was not being worshipped in the Imperial city. Most had forgotten about the deeds of Raymond Cyrodiil, and so by this point, the 9th divine was only worshipped in parts of Hammerfell, and became mostly a Yakutan deity. And through all of this, the Underking survived. Popular theory is that having his heart ripped out rendered him unconscious, but not dead, because he was truly banished from death. Without his heart, however, he began to take on a decrepit, old-looking form. And so the Underking, playing to the legends, calling himself Zurin Arctus, set events in motion in the Iliac Bay, during the game we know as Daggerfall. His goal was to reunite with the ghost of his heart and be able to achieve final death. Whether this final death was Zurin Arctus, or it was Wulfarth, or both, we have no idea. But either way, after the event known as the Warp in the West, the Underking was finally able to reunite with the ghost of his heart and achieve final death. It was his death indeed that acted as the trigger that created the Dragon Break, a distortion within time, a rewriting of events, the Warp in the West. Within the mythic, 3 separate people met, 3 people who had, at one point or another, worn the Mantle of Talos. And so, meeting in death, they became one within the mythic because each one was believed to have been a Shezareen, that is an aspect of Shezer or Shor or Lorkan, whichever you want to call him. But because these 3 wore the same mantle in life, so in death did they become that mantle together. They became Talos the God. As a result of this warp in the west, this dragon break, a brand new timeline was created retroactively from the moment Tiber Septim died, overwriting the past that we had known. So the events that happened during the fight for the Iliac Bay, none of that happened as we thought it had happened when we experienced those events. This brand new timeline created the god Talos at the point Tiber Septim, the first of the 3 Shezareens, died. And so while Akatosh is still being worshipped as the head of the Imperial Pantheon, Tiber Septim replaced Ebenarm within the mythic as the god of war, known collectively as Talos or Ysmir to the Nords. Wulfharth, being 1/3 of Talos, was replaced as the Ysmir, and Talos became that Ysmir. These were all effects of the warp in the west, and they were felt worldwide. As for what we touched on earlier, the Heart of Shor, the Heart of Lorkan, this wouldn't be seen again for some time, but that will be our topic next time. If you like this episode, go ahead and give it a like, and please do leave a comment. Check my social media links above for more content. Next time, we're going to be talking about the Heart of Lorkan and the Living Gods. Until then, I will see y'all next time.